Hey, welcome to the State of the Church. We do this segment once a month on the podcast, and we are diving into real-time changing, demographics, narratives, storylines that are appearing in the church. And I've got my good friend, David Kinnaman, CEO of the Barna Group here. And David, today you're digging into some data from Barna's new report, The Relationships of Today's Pastors. It covers, I should say, 10 insights on marriage, parenting. I'm finding this fascinating. So how are we doing? Like, what's going on in the interior lives of church leaders and pastors?
Well, good to see you, Carey. So great to be here with your listeners. And we're launching this new study called The Relationships of Today's Pastors. We're very excited about the findings. It does paint a very positive, mostly positive picture of the relational flourishing of pastors, but there are some things we have to talk about. So today I want to talk specifically about the mostly strong marriages of today's pastors. Overall, pastors score low on relational health generally in terms of friendships. They're actually lower in their relationships in general. So that's an important thing.
Yeah, it's a little alarming. That hasn't turned around.
Exactly, yeah. But marriage is one of the few places in their relational health that they're actually doing pretty well. So among those pastors who are married, and the vast majority of pastors are married, 76% say their spouse is their best friend. About half feel their spouse understands their ministry struggles, 47%, and in life generally at 53%. But that I think leaves some room for improvement. And then pastors who feel like their spouse
don't, right? That's the other thing, right?
Yeah, the half didn't give the strongest. I think it's a strong agreement to that, but half don't give strong agreement, and I think that's an important metric too. And then pastors who feel like their spouse understands their struggles are nearly 40 percentage points more likely to say that it's very true that they feel supported by their spouse in their role. So there's a real correlation between feeling like your spouse understands what it is you're doing in ministry, what you're shooting for. And again, when you've got sort of peace at home and an alignment, there's a lot greater resilience for leaders. So those are just a few of the findings. In addition, some of the challenges: 44% of pastors experience some marital conflict, which I think everyone probably experiences.
Yeah, I was going to be like, I've been married. Yep, get it.
The top sources of conflict for pastors who are married include time management, which makes sense. Emotional intimacy and ministry-related stress. So there's occupational hazards that come with pastoring. And then finally, only 28% are very satisfied with the time they can give to their marriage. So only a quarter. And yet 52% of pastors don't use any formal support, mentoring, counseling, coaching. Only 6% regularly attend marriage counseling. So one of the highlights here, an important one for us to talk about, is that pastors seem to be slow to seek out the very help that they offer and suggest to others when their own relationships are needing a tune-up or they're even suffering. So I think the relationships of today's pastors, this great new study points to 10 key insights. We're very pleased to take a look now at the health of pastors and what we can do to help support them.
Well, I love that you're looking into this. And, part of it is here we are alone again in leadership, right? This is not necessarily the way God designed it and intended it, but I appreciate it because it's a good look in the mirror. And I think it's an opportunity for us to really get better connected with maybe some of the professional resources that we refer other people to because other people need it. And maybe diversifying that friendship. I don't know. I mean, you had a long marriage with Jill, but I found with Tony that, I don't think God designed my spouse to bear the full pressure of everything that's wrong in my life. I think that's why he gave us friends as well and community. So some good notes there. David, I'm looking forward. You got more next month, right, from this study. So we'll drill down on that. If you want more as a leader, I would really encourage you to check it out. The Barna Group is just producing some incredible resources this year in particular in real time. You can find it all at stateofthechurch.com/Carey. And we'll be catching up next month. So keep an ear for that. And in the meantime, let's go to our regularly scheduled episode.
I'm not sure, this is an overstatement, I'm not sure cynicism is curable. I think it is if somebody decides I'm going to stop it. and basically takes a route out. In my opinion, cynicism is an addictive drug people take to make themselves feel superior. So we discovered there are 7 things that if somebody will build them into their life, they will have sustainable hope. The first one was this.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. Hey, today, you want to find out the one thing that separates ministry survivors from ministry casualties, the people who finish well versus the people who don't and who either flame out or they have some kind of, moral crisis in their life that disqualifies them from leadership. Well, Ray Johnston has been leading Bayside Church in Sacramento, California for over 3 decades. He shares some of his secrets to lasting decades in ministry. I'm so glad you joined us. You can like, subscribe, leave a comment to join the conversation, or join us in the Art of Leadership Academy. I would love to have you there. We're having robust conversations with thousands of church leaders about these very episodes. And sometimes, you want to take stuff off the comments publicly, have them privately, click the link, and you will get there. But first, before we get to a conversation with Ray, here's a word from our very carefully chosen partners. This episode is brought to you by Convoy of Hope. So mark your calendars and make plans to join me this fall for a very historic event, incredible conference held by my good friends at Convoy of Hope. I'll be at the Convoy of Hope's global headquarters and training center in Springfield, Missouri, November 5th through 7th for the inaugural Hope Summit. It's a gathering of more than 1,200 church and marketplace leaders, and it's going to provide you with a wealth of resources designed to help you have a significantly greater impact in your ministry from neighborhoods to nations. Hope Summit has an amazing lineup of speakers like Chris Hodges and Jenny Allen. I'll be speaking as well. Natalie Grant will be leading worship. And can I tell you, they got a great little coffee shop in that airport at Springfield. Anyway, you can register at hopesummit.com/Carey to take advantage of a special discounted rate. That's hopesummit.com/CAREY, and hope to see you this November at Hope Summit. Well, Ray, welcome to the podcast. This is so long overdue, and I'm so glad it's happening.
Hey, great to be with you, man. We missed you at our Thrive conference this year, but...
Well, I was just, sojourning in the hospital with, what do they call it? Warm idiopathic hemolytic anemia. I was busy. So...
Everybody right now is a dictionary out going.
I know. I had to call you from the hospital and text you and say, I'm not able to do the Thrive conference. I felt absolutely terrible about it. But, my first hospitalization, I think I've talked about it on my social. I don't think we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but that was back in late April, May of 2025. First time I was in the hospital since I had my tonsils out as a kid. And anyway, I'm making a recovery. And, but wow, next year at Thrive, right? I'll be there.
Friend, we've been praying for you. And
thank you. You have been, and texting you to see how I am.
Is having dinner at your house tonight?
She is. Yeah. Christy and Joey are coming over and we're going to hang out. It's going to be so much fun. So, Ray, you're a leader who absolutely fascinates me because you lead one of the biggest churches in America. You're so great at developing other leaders, which I really want to tap into. You have the energy. Is it fair to say you're in your 70s? Is that fair?
Yep, you bet.
Yeah. And you have the energy of someone in their teens, I think. That's my experience of you.
3 hours a day.
It's about 3 hours a day of energy in your teenage zone. But no, you're always optimistic, always positive, always like ready, bubbling forward new ideas. But it didn't start out that way. You went from being an atheist. So you had your own faith experience. And I remember having dinner with you and Carol one night and telling me about your family history and everything too. Didn't grow up exactly as a church boy.
No. Grew up in a Southern California family. My mom and dad were big deals down there. My dad was president of a media company where he was in his 40s. And matter of fact, he ran in some pretty unbelievable circles. Guys wanted to run him for governor of California. He turned them down, and they ran a guy named Ronald Reagan instead. So
whoa.
The circles he grew up in. So
what studio did he run?
It was the Knight Ridder Publications. Okay. And so there were newspapers down in...
Yeah, I remember Knight Ridder. Wow.
Yeah. But it's interesting. He was an atheist growing up. So I was an atheist growing up. He then became an alcoholic. So did my mom. He became an alcoholic rageaholic. And so that's the home I grew up in. I had 2 younger sisters. And I got the best parenting because when somebody is in the process of becoming an alcoholic, they become a worse parent. And so I kind of got the best parenting. But about age 10 or 11, he was checking out. And my younger sisters didn't get much of that. But because he was an atheist, I was an atheist. Matter of fact, Carey, I actually talked a guy out of becoming a Christian when I was 18 years old, which does not look good on the pastor's resume.
Oh my goodness.
But I was playing basketball. I played basketball in high school and college, and a couple of guys on the team were Christians, and they hauled me to this church. And I walked in, it was Lake Avenue Church in Pasadena, California. Had a pastor named Ray Ortland, who was like Jesus as a senior pastor. And they had a youth pastor named Chuck Miller, who was like General Patton, and kind of a great combination. But it took me my first ever time in church. I walked out of there going, there's thousands of people here. These are some of the sharpest people I've ever met. Okay. Business leaders, just very sharp people, socially. I went, the caliber of people in this room is really good. And my real thought was, how could such smart people believe such stupid stuff? But I kept going back, and then I read everything I could. It took about 6 to 8 months walking in the mountains, unpacking stuff in my head, reading all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't one thing. It was really, did the resurrection happen, and is the evidence for it compelling enough? And I remember one time waking up and I went, oh man, it's 51 to 49. I now believe more than I don't believe, which means I'm now on this side of the ledger. Now, I didn't want to become a Christian. I did not want to go to church. I did not want to give 10% of my money away. I did not want to do any of that stuff, but it was so compelling that I pretty much went, all right. The minute I believed it was true, I was all in. And so I dove in, and the rest is kind of history. But for me, I'm an evidence guy, and it was more evidence for the resurrection. But it wasn't one thing. It was a preponderance of evidence. And I just went because for me, the key issue was that, did the resurrection happen or didn't? If it did, it's legit. If not, you could throw the whole thing away. So
I want to back up a little bit. You know, you talked about alcoholic, rageaholic, that when someone's becoming an alcoholic, they become a better parent because they become a worse parent? Can you unpack some of that? What happened? Because, you know, and I'll tell you one of the reasons I'm asking the question, you know, as I get older, I think a lot about my childhood, more than I did 20 years ago. I don't know whether you do, but having read Bono's biography, Stories of Surrender, watching the documentary Stories of Surrender just recently on Apple TV, he spent a 90-minute primetime TV special, 80% of it talking about his parents as a 65-year-old man, which was really interesting. It was really well done, but I'm convinced that in our leadership, in our life, those early experiences wound us, shape us. So can you take us back a little bit and unpack how that developed young Ray that became the mega church pastor we're talking to today? Like, what were those years from 5 to 15 like in your house?
All right, going deep. Here we go.
Yes, sir.
I haven't talked about this much. My dad, when I was about 10 or 11, checked out, and his alcohol intake, and it was horrible because he was an alcoholic rageaholic. And then when my mom would drink, they would have these all out. So it would be like midnight. I'd be in bed. My two sisters were in the adjoining room. They were in their own bedroom, and they were both younger. And it's about 10 or 11, and you would hear these screams and things getting thrown and all this stuff, all chaos. And my younger sisters would come running into my room and crying, hop in bed with me. I'd give them a hug. And if it continued, I would take the screen off the window. I would hop out, they would hop out, and we'd be walking the streets in Southern California, midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, until we come back to the house, and we didn't hear any yelling. So they had worn themselves out and gone to bed or whatever they were doing. And so I'd get them back in. I actually had a trundle bed underneath my bed, so I would pull that out, put them in there. So
protect your sisters.
It was a crazy childhood, crazy for them. And But then what happened is this: my grandmother, who was in St. Paul, Minnesota, and by this time I ended up becoming a Christian. It's my senior year of college, and my mom and I go back to move my grandmother out of her old house and to bring her to the West Coast. And so I'm going through stuff at night, cleaning out drawers, all this kind of stuff. And it's midnight one night, and everybody's gone to bed. And I open this drawer and I pick all this stuff out. And I pick out a newspaper and I look at the headline, and it says Ray Johnston. I'm the third. So my dad was Ray Johnston Jr., and his dad was a judge in Minnesota. Very sharp guy. He was injured in World War I. Nobody knew anything about PTSD. All they did was give him opium. And evidently, he, while being a judge, got addicted to opium. And the article said Ray Johnston, judge, shot and killed himself last night.
Suicide.
Newspaper.
And that was your grandfather?
That was my grandfather. And I'm reading this, and I'm going, my dad was 10 when that happened. And so that affected me in two major ways. One is we have 4 kids, 2 boys, twin daughters. They're awesome. But when they turned 10, I went, I'm going to have to pay attention. My dad was a great dad until I was 10. And I mean, we played every sport imaginable, golf, but when I turned 10, he just vaporized. And then home was crazy. So I went, I'm going to have to be a lot more intentional about being a dad after they're 10 years old. Okay. That's one stream. Another stream of that was when I went home, home was an unsafe place. You'd have to walk into my home, go find my dad, and see how he was. And if he was okay, then you could relax and enjoy being there. But you couldn't relax and enjoy being there until you went and found my dad and found
took the temperature.
Okay. Well, I get married to Carol, who was the most level-headed person in the world. And about first 6 months, I'm coming home, and if she didn't run up and give me a big hug, I'd be like, "Are you okay? Are we okay?" And she pretty much at one point said, "You're going to assume we're okay, and if we're not, I'll let you know." But I realized, wait a second. I unpacked this with her, and I just said, "I realize you're not my dad, so I'm going to assume we're good." But all that stuff has ripple effects that either go negative, or if you work them through counseling, whatever you work them through, you can, I think, get healthier and be more helpful. But when just awareness of the price tag that your past is going to lay on you.
When did you start to realize that you had a lot to unpack? Because I think most people think their house is normal, right? Whether throwing stuff and getting drunk is normal, or being sober and sane and not having dinner conversations is normal. Most people grow up thinking everybody's this way. And then there's a certain point at which you kind of look around and go, oh, everybody's not this way. When did that hit you?
The church.
The church, really?
Church. I know. Now, people have written books like Death by Church or Loving God When You Can't Stand the Church, all this kind of stuff. I'm on the extreme other end. Man, Carey, matter of fact, all of you listening, you may never hear them. I love the Christian church. It was the Christian church that when I was an atheist put up with me and answered all my questions. It was the Christian church that loved me. It was the Christian church that led me to Christ. It was the Christian church that helped me grow. It was the Christian church that helped me discover my calling in life. It was the Christian church that let me lead worship one time and helped me figure out I should never again do that. It was the Christian church that helped me find my calling. And it was the Christian church, by comparison, that taught me what I grew up in was not the norm that it could be. And because I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Sure.
The Christian church, as a matter of fact, was the Christian church that basically healed my image of God, healed my image of myself, and healed my image of marriage. And my mom and dad blew their marriage apart, which was no great surprise to anybody, because if you go back in my family tree, you go back 140 years, there wasn't one lasting marriage, not one.
I remember you telling me that, and I was going to raise that today. 140 years, everybody got divorced.
Not one lasting marriage. Grandparents both divorced. Mom had 3 sisters, married and divorced. One of them married 3 times. One of the marriages was 3 days. I mean, there were no lasting marriages in there. Carol and I just celebrated our 42nd wedding anniversary, which means...
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's all due to my wife. We have the longest running marriage in the history of my family tree. So I just love it when somebody comes up and goes, I still think Jesus or the Bible or the church really make that much of a difference. All I have to do is get my family tree out and go, 140 plus years of past disaster patterns were broken in one generation. Pretty much the church taught me, take my tree, take our family tree, cut it down, and we're just building a brand new family tree that hopefully goes on for generations with a different foundation. So I love the church because the church, it was the church. Like, I'm living a life I don't deserve, and it's all because of the Christian church.
When you were 10, what shifted in your dad?
Disconnection. As alcohol rose, disconnection happened. And it's funny because he was not the same guy. Like, when I was younger, we played every sport imaginable. And 24/7. He'd get home, we'd go play baseball, basketball. I mean, we'd golf every Saturday. I mean, all the stuff. And at 10, that all came to a screeching halt.
What did that do to you?
What's funny, at the time, when you're 10, you're also developing all these other friendships. So
yeah.
You're doing other stuff. So I'm not sure I felt it I don't know that it dawned on me.
Sure.
That was happening. I just thought, when you're 10, 11, you're going with your friends, your dad's doing whatever he's doing. So I don't know that it did a lot of that kind of stuff to me. What it did, though, was wake me up as a dad to go, you know what? This is time to get closer and have more fun together. And so, I was also in youth ministry for a while. That was a massive benefit to it. So,
yeah. When I've got a few more questions about that, and I want to ask you about what you did with your kids when they turned 10. But before we get there, I think a lot of these issues surface later in life, in your 20s or 30s, where you kind of notice, my dad wasn't there for me. Or, they were raging alcoholics. Or, my family tree does go back 140 years with no lasting marriages, right? When was that, your 20s, your 30s? Has it been progressive over decades that you've and then what did you do with that? Because if you look, Ray, at a lot of the moral failure, you and I have talked about that's happened to a lot of well-known pastors, not an excuse, not a justification, but usually you still find underneath that some kind of brokenness that happened early in life, whether that was with a parent or something that happened. And obviously in your 70s now, you processed all of that, you're leading well. I'd love to know, for the leaders listening, when that sort of came on your radar screen, how you processed it, just what did that look like for you as you processed sort of the losses of a tough childhood?
Well, the 2 most helpful things are, I went and got some counseling in Southern California, and that really helps. However, pick a really good counselor.
Yeah. They're not all the same.
They are not all the same. Find somebody, get some recommendations. And then I have somebody here I check in with when I need to check in.
So you're still going?
Oh yeah. But it's not, now it's hit and miss.
Yeah, sure. Me too. I tune up.
I go and see the same counselor. However, every leadership conference I've spoken at, whether it was, like, I just did a day with CEOs, and then I did a day with senior pastors. I told them the same thing. I said, because I think this is as important as background wounds. Every one of us has 2 levels, okay? You have a challenge level and a support level, okay? And in other words, and the most important thing about you is the interaction of those 2 levels, okay? And when what's happened, as most people, and in fact, almost all pastors, almost all CEOs, what's happened is their challenge level has gone up, okay? And COVID hit and everybody's challenge level went sky high. Okay? But their support level didn't, or it actually dropped. And the distance between your level of challenge and your level of support, that's destructive stress. And almost all affairs on the part of especially men, they're not love, it's inappropriate stress relief. Almost all alcohol stuff that gets triggered, a lot of it is inappropriate stress relief. Almost all drug abuse, almost all of that kind of excitement thing I need too much adventure or whatever it is inappropriate stress relief. And the problem is this, like Americans tried to solve that for 9 straight months by resigning their job in record numbers. They couldn't raise their level of support, so they just dropped their level of challenge only to wake up and go, I got a new set of challenges, unemployment, okay? I think the only way to do that is if you can lower your challenges some, but we've got to raise our level of support.
I have not heard that framing, and so much makes sense the moment you articulated that.
Somewhere I come back and people want to have that conversation.
Yeah. So your support is counselors. Who else do you process with?
You surround yourself with, say, if you're putting a staff together, you need a staff that has your back.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I would say this: if you're a senior pastor, if you have staff people and you're paying them and they don't have your back, fire them. You can get people who don't have your back for free. I want to walk into a room and go, they're here. I want them. Matter of fact, one of our pastors, Jason Kane, said to me a while back, he goes, I love being here because you love us. And it was one of the coolest things anybody's ever said to me, but I feel the same from him. And I feel the same from these folks. If we're in a room, it feels like we're in the room and we're good. And I'll never forget, COVID blew that apart some. And 2 years ago at our pastor retreat down in Palm Springs, it all came back together. And some of us were in tears, looking at each other going, all right, we're back. And I don't know that they would put it this way, but basically what they just felt like was the entire floor of support just went up a whole lot of notches. And so some of it is, matter of fact, I also think you're going, who is it that drains you? Spend less time with them. What is it that drains you? Spend less time doing that. Matter of fact, church boards have a lot of different responsibilities. Most church boards need to wake up and say, one of our primary jobs is to be a support mechanism for the senior pastor. So it's funny, we didn't have a board like that when COVID broke out. We do now. I've been on 3 retreats with our board in the last season. I'd go on vacation with any of them.
How do you do that? I want to come back to the 10-year-old thing. How do you do that though and still have accountability where the board can call you out? Because I find we can almost gravitate to 2 poles, and you lead a very, very large church, tens of thousands of people call it home, one of the largest in America. But you can get your buddy club that just supports you and says yes, or you can get the oppositional hermeneutic of suspicion board that challenges you at every decision. Both have strong weaknesses. So how do you have that support but still keep the challenge? Or is that challenge part of a different function from someone else?
Carey, that's really smart. You need the board is responsible to guard the core values of the church. For
100%. Yeah. The mission, right? Like you could go off the rails and then it's the board's job.
Yes. It's responsible to guard the culture. Now it's responsible to make sure the ministry is solvent. It's responsible for financial health. It's responsible for the board, which means we need really competent and strong people on the board. Okay.
Yes.
However, there are people that are strong and oppositional, and there are people that are strong and supportive. The price tag these days for people is oppositional people. It's the weight's too heavy on leaders these days. I did an interview with Henry Cloud.
Yeah.
I said, where are people psychologically? And he was brilliant. He said, matter of fact, this was game changing when I realized this. He said, nobody ever put it better than Proverbs. They're either wise, foolish, or evil. And I said, how do you track that? And he said, well, wise people are humble, teachable, and they're always getting better.
Yeah.
Fools respond to correction or anything with blame and attack. And he said, and evil people seek to be destructive.
Yeah, they're out to hurt you.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite framings, the world is three kinds of people. I think that's from Necessary Endings.
And I think what happened is COVID and all the other pandemics that went with it, and politics now and fraction political parties have a whole lot of people in church have dropped a half to a full category. So wise people, humble, teachable, have basically been in blame and attack mode. And a lot of that gets focused at the pastor. And then blame and attack people, a lot of those folks who were basically fools, they have become evil. And now they're just trying to be destructive, which means for our pastors or leaders, for your own emotional health, you have got to figure out, how do I raise my level of support at a board level, at a staff level, at a friendship level? One of the reasons I'm glad you're in Carey's podcast is it's a massive dose of support. Okay. And anything you can do to raise your level of support is going to make you better, make you be better. And then you'll be less susceptible to all the toxic stuff that floods into our lives when that gap is too big.
Had you not had that level of support, what do you think your story would have been over the last 30, 40 years?
It's funny. I have no idea. I think I would have been an emotionally unhealthy, successful businessman. So I'd probably have a lot more money. And I'd probably have a lot more money. But I think that's a great question, Carey. I don't think I would have gone down the road of alcohol because I watched what it did. Okay.
Yeah.
I
don't touch.
Though my dad's problem with alcohol wasn't ultimately a problem with alcohol. It was medicating pain. And I think my dad had an addictive behavior, and so did my mom, which means I would have gotten addicted to things that were probably far less healthy. Okay. But it wouldn't have been alcohol. It probably would have been something else.
It's interesting, you talk about successful business person. Part of my call to ministry started with a supernatural vision at 3:00 one afternoon. Sounds like it's out of the book of Acts, but I was at a law firm. I was 24, saw a vision of myself in a daydream. Like literally I was awake, but I saw this. It was supernatural. 44, 20 years down the road, very successful, making a ton of money, and spiritually and morally bankrupt. And I knew in that moment law was not going to be my future, but I didn't know what was. And I walked to another office in the firm, the library, looked down the window. There was the church I grew up in my hometown. And I felt a voice tell me, you're supposed to be in there. And so interesting, but it would have been a very similar thing for me, very successful, I think, but very bankrupt in the end, by the grace of God. So your dad, if I got this right, the story right, your grandfather shot himself, killed himself when your dad was 10.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
At 10, your dad goes off the rails and becomes a raging alcoholic. When you were 10, and you have 4 children, 2 sons, 2 daughters, correct? They're 10. What changes for you?
My intentionality with them went sky high from them.
You broke the generational curse.
Exactly. Which you have to. And frankly, to be really honest, I was a youth pastor for years. I never wanted to be a senior pastor. I would way rather train leaders than be a senior pastor. So I did not want to be a senior pastor. Okay. And so I did youth ministry for a bunch of years, left that, taught in 2 graduate schools in Chicago and then a college, and then came back to California and pretty much went, I'm just going to train leaders and encourage leaders. And so I never wanted to be a pastor. And I forget what the original question was.
Well, no, just keep going. It was about what you changed when your children turned 10.
Yeah, what changed was this. I went, I'm going to be way more intentional about this. The first 10 years, okay, it was easy. I just had a blast being with them. Okay?
Yeah.
Then on, I went, okay, this could be a different ballgame. Okay. But I also had done enough stuff on parenting stages, like, it takes 3 stages to get into full childhood. And I think it's the same 3 stages repeat to get into full adulthood. Okay. And so I'd been in enough stuff where I knew sort of adolescent development stuff because I used to teach it, that I went, okay, they're going to be in this stage, which means I need to do this during this stage. And the main one for me was, my dad ended up living a life I didn't want. And I'm working on 3 parenting books right now, all of them short. All of them under the banner of raising G-rated kids in an X-rated world. The title of the last book is going to be Become the Parent Your Kids Want to Be Around. And so I've been talking to a whole bunch of dads whose kids love them and flock to them, including older kids. And one guy told me, he said, my goal was this. I wanted to live a life my kids envied. And what a genius parenting goal. And so I pretty much went, I'm going to be really intentional. So for example, if a teenager goes off the rails, they go off the rails for the most part, their sophomore and junior year, not their freshman year. It's too new. They don't have a driver's license, and not their senior year. Their senior year, they pretty much go, you know what? Why screw up my life to please a bunch of people I'm never going to see again? So it's sophomore and junior years. So I decided with my kids, like for example, my daughters, okay, their junior year, Carol and I took them out of school for 6 weeks. The school freaked out. I was like, look, they're our kids.
And your daughters are twins, by the way. They're the same age.
So took them out of school and we went to Africa, to Kenya, and did about a 1.5 week missions thing there. And then we went to Germany, visited Scott at a Bible college there. And then we went to Paris and toured all the stuff, and then went to Germany and went to concentration camps and all of this kind of stuff. And then we went to London. We had an absolute ball for 5 weeks. We got 6 weeks off. And then we came back. Instead of putting them back in school, they'd gotten all their homework from their teachers. We went to Newport Beach and just sat at the beach. They did all their homework at the beach while their friends were all sweating stuff. And we had a blast, lifetime full of memories, an absolute ball. Because I never explained this to them. I could now. I wanted to break the cycle of peer pressure, either their sophomore or junior year. And so what I was doing, I was going, if they grow up fast, it's going to be sophomore year. If they're a little slower, it's going to be their junior year. So it was their junior year. We had a blast. The school freaked out, but they still managed to graduate and go to college. So some of that was, I wanted to be really intentional about what we did as a family, especially post 10. So
I know your daughters better than I know your sons, but I've met, I think, all of your kids, and Christy in particular I know well because Joey and Christy are friends. But
and boy, they love you.
Oh, it's so mutual. What? Like your daughters seem to really enjoy hanging around you, and I've just seen it behind the scenes. When we're in California together, we've been up here together. What do you think makes that? Because there are parents who would be like, I would love for that to happen when I have daughters in their 20s and 30s, sons in their 20s and 30s. What are some of the ingredients for the young parents? These could be decisions you made, like obviously in their sophomore year, or decisions you made when they were little girls or in their 20s that set up the conditions for that to be true at this stage in life.
First of all, you're right. Number one is, I have a lifelong prayer that all 4 of my kids turn out like mom. And so good. She's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
And we are a really good tandem. But wow, that's a great question. One of our goals is to stay connected. Okay. Like no matter what a parent's going through, kids walking away from the Christian faith, leaving church, doing drugs, whatever it is, I just have one response: maintain the relationship. Maintain the relationship. Okay. And so like this week, my son Mark, his wife Gia, they're incredible. The matter of fact, when we met her, I took Mark out to dinner and I said, "Hey, look, for the record, she's the closest thing to your mom I've ever seen in my life." I said to him, "Don't screw this up because we're keeping her."
Yeah. They're
amazing. And so they came over, we had dinner with them, and then Scott and Kayla dropped all the grandkids off last night, and they go and then our daughter, I thought you raise kids and lose them. And that happens a lot of times because they should be on their way to their lives through our lives. Okay. However, we did enough maintenance of relationships where we just have had a blast. So and so all of them cycled back and they all now live near us. And I never saw this coming because I thought you raise them, lose them. We raised them, lost them. They all cycled back and I get choked up talking about this. They become part of our friend group. They're a blast. And so a lot of nights we get phone calls. All right, what are we doing for dinner? Which means, what are you buying us for dinner?
Right.
But it's a pretty cool thing. Some of it was intentionality. Like a psychologist told me one time, most girls get their self-image from the opposite sex parent. And so my goal was just to raise two daughters that thought they were the greatest human beings in the world and build a healthy self-image. And so we went on daddy-daughter date nights all the time. And then when they were in high school, we did the same thing. And they went to college and I would fly down about every couple months and we'd go out to Palm Springs or Newport Beach for a weekend. And that maintained the relationship. My dad maintained a relationship until he was 10. He dropped it. A lot of parents do that until the teenage years. And then
18. It's like, well, now what?
For me, I just went, let's maintain the relationship, but it's just got to be really enjoyable.
For you and Carol, reversing 140-year curse in the family. 42 years married?
Yep.
What's made it work?
Carol.
Okay, that's fair.
I think there's something to be said for there is no escape hatch.
And did you make that decision early on?
Now, I met Christ at Lake Avenue Congregational.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of us started this Bible study in this town called Duarte, and it blew up and became a church. And it was awesome. It was a church of about 100 people, maybe 110 on an outreach weekend. And it never got bigger than that. But it was the greatest collection of people. I was there for like 7 years, never saw a divorce, not one divorce. Maybe 10 years. And so it never dawned on either Carol or I, because we met, like we're going, okay, all of our relatives are a mess because they're not Christians, so they're not obeying the Bible. To put it simply, we're just going to do what it says as best as we can. And so we're like, well, we're in. Okay. And I don't think either one of us ever thought there was ever an escape hatch. And I think if you talk to our kids, they would go, oh, if mom and dad were having an argument or something like that, we never thought they would separate.
Yeah. Did you live in that fear as a child, a teenager, that your parents were in a divorce?
Our home was such a mess that divorce was a relief. The implications of it weren't, but the divorce was, everybody was like, okay, at least they won't be in the same house screaming at each other anymore. And so, so the divorce thing, that was a whole different ballgame.
Wow. For families, do you have any rules? Like one of mine is your emotions eventually catch up to your obedience. Tony and I have had seasons in our 35 years together.
That's good.
2 lawyers, and there are times where your emotions aren't really there, but if your obedience is, your emotions will catch up. Do you have any principles or guidelines or rules that have helped you and Carol through the different seasons of 4 decades of marriage that could be helpful for couples who are 5-10 years in and wondering, 40 sounds like a long time.
Hey, there are times where you're like, okay, this does sound like a long time. For my wife, of course, not me, if she's listening. You know what was a game changer for me happened. It was a long time ago now. My daughter Leslie came home, and she said, "Dad, I have to write a paper on a leader." And she said, "And they know who you are, so I picked you, and they said it was okay." And she's got this piece of paper. And she goes, "And I got 20 questions, and Dad, you have to answer them all honestly." And we have a jacuzzi in the backyard. I said, "Well, let's just go in the jacuzzi because I'm going to end up in hot water. Let's just start there." We talked for 2 hours. It was phenomenal. Okay. And I mean, covered everything under the sun. Her last question was I think, maybe the most important question in life, marriage, ministry, anything else. She looked at me and said, "What's the most important thing you do as a leader?" And I said, "That's easy, but it's bigger than that. The most important thing I do as a husband, as a dad, as a Christian, as a leader, is this: make sure I stay encouraged. And it's make sure I stay encouraged." And I said, because if I'm not encouraged, I will never be the leader that I think our church and God need me to be. If I'm encouraged, I will never be the husband, mom dreams up I could be someday. If I'm not encouraged, I got choked up and I said, if I'm not encouraged, I will not be the dad you need me to be. If I'm not encouraged, and I said, the single most important thing about any human being is, are they encouraged? Which means what happened is that led to, I did a 7-year study because I was literally going, what causes hope?
Yes, that was my next question. So let's go there.
I did not intend to write a book on hope, which I did. And there's not a sales pitch for a book because it came out a long time ago. What happened though is this: I started going, so I would tell that story at leadership conferences. I would come back a year later and people would flock up and go, that whole thing about, am I encouraged, changed my life. Because you're pretty much going, look, whatever's discouraging you, you cannot afford. Discouragement is a universal, repeating, contagious, totally destructive disease, and it always has a cause, okay? Which means I've got to do far less things that discourage me. And if there's somebody that discourages you, just don't hang out with them. And if there are people that encourage you, hire them, get close to them. You're going to be better. In other words, and so what happened is I went, I'm going to investigate hope. I read a bunch of stuff on hope, and I realized it was all trite. It was like, trust God. And I realized hope is not a primary condition. It's a secondary condition based on causes. And so I worked with a Harvard grad named Rick Nash, brilliant guy, and a PhD professor from Regent. And it took 7 years. We did a 7-year study on what is it that causes sustainable hope.
Wow.
And over 7 years, and we surveyed 1,000 people every state, developing baselines on this. It was more science necessary, stuff like that. And over those 7 years, we discovered there are 7 things that if somebody will build them into their life, they will have sustainable hope. Okay. And if they don't build them into their life, or their kids, or there was this stuff I tried to build into my kids too. But it was interesting when the book came out, it hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list because business people were reading it because they're smart enough to know, if I don't have hope, my company has no future.
Yeah, we're in trouble. What were some of the 7, Ray? Because I'm very interested in that. And here's what's really, having spent a lot of time with you through, our friendship with your kids, through Mark Clark, really getting to know you. You are not a cynical older leader. You are hopeful. You are optimistic. Like I said, 70 something going on 17. Like there is that. energy, there's that enthusiasm, and that's true in every setting I've seen you, at a restaurant, on the road, at your house, in the green room, different settings, different seasons. I think I've had enough time with you to know, no, that's Ray. He's going to be encouraging. And that is very rare air for someone at your age and stage, and also your longevity at the same church for decades, right? So what are some of the ingredients that have helped you stay encouraged and find hope?
It's funny. Full disclosure, I brought it here because I was occasionally, I don't reread my book, but occasionally, if I'm bummed out, discouraged, getting cynical or whatever, I'll literally go, what's wrong with me? I was signing this for a young leader a while back, and I said, he said, I'm looking forward to reading it. And I said, I didn't really write this so you could read it. I wrote this so you could build these 7 things into your life. And whenever you're not in a good place, go back, because one of these things or more will be off. And so the first one was this: recharge your batteries. Okay. If I'm running on empty, matter of fact, those of you listening to this, you're listening to this because you want to recharge your batteries. Okay.
Yeah.
You're hoping to walk out of here more encouraged. And fortunately, Carey's great at this. If I'm running on empty, nothing runs well if the batteries are dead. Nothing, especially human beings. So if I'm grouchy with Carol, I'm usually grouchy with Carol because I'm on deplete mode.
Yeah.
So number one is figure out what recharges you and do a bunch of it.
So what recharges you?
Great friends recharge me. 5 hours of golf with good friends. Matter of fact, I have 2 golf rules: never play with a jerk, and golf's a great sport if you're not trying to do too well. And being in a dream meeting with a bunch of people dreaming, being with my family, like going to church. I love it. Especially when not preaching. I would rather these days listen to a sermon than preach one. Okay.
I'm going to put a pin on that because I'm coming back to it. You're one of the few preachers who really loves other people preaching.
Getting away with Carol recharges my batteries. Okay. Having the grandkids come over recharge my batteries, but we love seeing them come and we love seeing them go.
So it's kind of like Steve Cuss's life-giving list. You've just got a list of things that are idiosyncratic to you that, if I'm running on fumes, I got to hit the golf course. We got to go for dinner with friends. We got to, okay, good.
And then conversely, you go, what drains me? Staff conflict drains me. Okay. We've gotten picketed and sued and had crazy stuff happen. All like that stuff doesn't bother me a bit. Okay. Staff conflict, I want to quit. Okay. And so.
What kind of conflict makes you want to quit?
Any kind of staff conflict. If our staff. I just feel like, Rodney, can't we all get along? So everybody just chill out. So, and over time, those folks hopefully get weeded out. So you end up with a bunch of people that are far better being connectional.
So staff conflict kills you.
So the first one we recharge. Second one is raise your expectations. Okay. I believe you don't get what you deserve. Sometimes you get what you expect. I don't know if you read Steve Jobs' biography.
Isaacson's?
Yes.
Yeah, love it.
First half of the book was Steve being a jerk. The second half, he's still treating people badly, but he's a great leader. And I read that way. Steve Jobs believes impossible things are possible.
Yeah. That reality distortion field.
Same time, every church in America, we can't do that. It's not in the budget. And with the secular world is starting to believe impossible things can happen. At the same time, the spiritual world is believing it can't happen. And so I think there's something about having your expectations raised that is a really good thing. It's why I like people coming to the Thrive Conference. I like people tuning into this kind of stuff. People hear this and they go, whoa, there is no ceiling, or is at least a mile above where I thought it was. Okay. The third one is this: refocus on the future. Okay. I mean, nobody goes forward well if they're looking back.
Yeah.
And so refocusing on the future. We did this twice in the last 5 years. We took all of our staff. I began to feel like culture was unhealthy. We took all of our staff And we had our entire staff. We went, we're going to invent culture here. At our best, who are we? And we started with our entire staff, okay? And we said, this is a team thing. Who do we want to be? And then it went from our staff to our pastors back to our staff. It went through 62 revisions.
Wow.
By the time we were done, we have a 3-page document of who we are. And it's basically the front cover is all about 3 things: live well, love well, and lead well. Most churches only care if you lead well. We want people to live better because they're on our staff, love better because they're on our staff, and lead better because they're on our staff. And then there were all these different, our first statement is health is more important than growth, okay? And we have 13 of those. But if we're going to hire somebody, I pull this thing out, I give them a copy, I read it to them word for word, and I say, if this doesn't light you up, then don't come here, okay?
Right.
And we are getting to the point where we are going to be reading it. Everybody's going to read it once a year, and we all sign it and recommit ourselves to it, okay? And then we did the same thing. We got our pastors together, and the only question we asked, it was the same thing. It was a future question. We said, if we are going to be together for a long time, like all of our senior pastors, what if we attempted it and it actually happened, would be worth giving the rest of our lives to make happen? And it was 6 months. Brought in Brad Lomenick, who was a consultant for some of this kind of stuff. Guy's genius. And we worked, and by the time the dust settled, there were 8 things we're about. But the entire future got crystal clear. It told us what to do, but everybody was fired up about it because it's not my church, it's our church, and now it's their thing. Okay. And there were, I'll just give play to your.
Yeah. Give us a point blank on the 4 others.
Yeah. Play to your strengths, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. Okay. Do most what you do best. The next one was refuse to go it alone. Never underestimate the power of support. Okay. The next one was replace burnout with balance. And that's a long chapter with a whole lot of systems in it and tests. And the last one was play great defense. And when we did this, one of our guys was like, I don't think this defense has any correlation to hope. And a couple of us thought it did. So we tested this around the country. He came back and said, the quickest correlation between having hope or losing hope is playing great defense. You know, when discouragement enters, hope exits. When bitterness enters, hope exits. And it was an entire thing on, am I letting there are 5 of them, am I letting these 5 things into my life? Because if I am, hope's going to be hard to find until I make sure these destructive things don't get distracted, they got to get out of me.
You know what's not on the list? Coming home and saying, Carol, encourage me. If you think about how many relationships one partner is looking to the other spouse to encourage them, and you're both having bad days, it's funny that fuel is coming in from other sources to strengthen the marriage. Interesting.
Yep.
Wow.
I'm usually the one walking home going, Carol, encourage me. So, because there's sometimes that has to happen. Or she'll look at me and go, could you take a quick break, quit being a jerk? I'll go, good, I'll be back.
Oh, sure. I mean, you can spell each other off, but long term, you can end up with 2 balloons trying to fill each other, and eventually you leak air and there's nothing left. That is brilliant. I've never heard of it. And you're right. The church answer is trust God, pray, and read your Bible.
Yes. It took a long time for us to realize it. And I was working with really smart people.
Yeah. Well, 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. I was like, this isn't ever going to get written. But it was for me, the whole thing was triggered by a conversation with my daughter when she said, what's the most important thing you do?
Yeah. Back to the hot tub.
That's right.
To stay encouraged. Right. And you look at that, how have you not grown cynical? You've seen a lot of colleagues grow cynical. You've seen a lot of people you grew up with get cynical. Cynical and age are frequent companions. And around 40,
it's interesting.
20 years ago, I realized, I could become cynical. I could be that guy, because cynicism is equated with knowledge, right? With much wisdom comes much grief. With much knowledge comes much sorrow. That's Solomon. And I think he's right. You're happy when you're young because you're stupid. But as you get older, it gets harder. And so what has kept you hopeful, optimistic, and looking to the future after decades of ministry?
I'm not going to name the church, but it's a very large church. And several times recently, we have so many pastors. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm like frosting around here. So I get calls occasionally going, this mega church is in trouble. Can you go in and be their interim person? So I've done that several
You've done that a few times. Yeah.
Last one, the church is massive. And it was interesting because I walked in this church and the day later I went, church is simple. Okay. And the largest church, help me figure this out. You got a board, you got a staff, and you got people. Boom, there's the church. And the board needed serious fixing. Okay. The staff was cynical. I'll come back to that in a second. And then the people, they were great. They were like, could we just love God and stay out of the headlines and be a church? And so we worked with the board, mainly with the board, to make sure the right person was running it, which happened. And then we pretty much went, look, your number one job is to find a senior pastor, but here's the 8 things you look for. So we literally drilled this in, got that cemented in, and that happened. The staff was cynical, I think, was pretty good reason. But I'm not sure. This is an overstatement. I'm not sure cynicism is curable. I think it is if somebody decides I'm going to stop it, and basically takes a route out. In my opinion, cynicism is an addictive drug people take to make themselves feel superior. Because if I'm cynical, then I'm putting myself as judge over things, which means now I'm better than all of these people that aren't smart enough. All this kind of stuff. I heard Lloyd John Ogilvie say one time, he said, God alone is judge. And he said, the second you take God's place as judge, which cynics do, the second you do that, your wiring, human beings are not hardwired to take God's role as judge. So the minute I step into the role of judge, I short circuit on the inside and my wires get fried. And so I get cynical because my inner wiring has been fried. And he actually said this, every negative, toxic mood you've ever been in comes from taking God's role as judge. Judging yourself, judging your circumstances, or judging other people. And
it's a big insight
stuff. But I had some early Lake Avenue Church was awesome. They had low tolerance for bad attitudes. And so I think I got some pretty good training on that. And I've always kind of felt like cynicism is a destructive disease. And I didn't want it in my house, didn't want it in my family. And matter of fact, remember, Carol had been married about a year, and I walked in and some smart aleck comment like, hey, what's the burnt offering for tonight? And she stopped me, and she's made it crystal clear that there was going to be no cynicism in our house and no chopping of anybody down in our house. Or if that was going to be part of how I operated there was a spare bedroom. And so I was pretty much like, okay. So a lot of that is Carol. I mean, some early stuff on that, but Carol has been a great, great person on that. She just wants a clean heart and wants people to be grateful. So,
none of us gets everything right, Ray, and you made mistakes over time. I made some mistakes over time. What are some leadership mistakes you've made over the 40 years that you've been in leadership that if you could have a do-over, you're like, oh, that was a road I didn't need to walk down?
You sent me this question.
Yeah, I don't think I've looked at my questions since we started.
Yeah.
By the way, we're an hour into this, and that's a really good sign, Ray. That is not a problem.
This was I got to find this because it was.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it in my notes.
By the way, I can. Yeah, here we go. It's question number
blind spots 13.
No, it's 13. The number, like in terms of mistakes, blind spots, all of that kind of stuff. I could write for hours. This is embarrassing. One of the reasons we are who we are now is about 15 years ago. We had about 145 staff, and I began to feel like our staff's not healthy and not happy. Okay. We had hired some people at the top that were far less feeling and far more like run the organization. And what happened is, so we brought in a company and they surveyed everybody, 145 people. It was pretty much like giving 145 people a loaded gun and total anonymity. And all of our leaders got feedback from 3 to 5 people. I got direct feedback, Carey, from 145 people. It was like a 40-page book. And I read it, every single thing in it, and it wrecked me. And my first thought was, I quit. I don't need this. And then my second thought was, I'm not quitting. I'm firing everybody. I can get these attitudes for free. and then I didn't want to do this. So I brought it home and I gave it to my wife and I said, I don't really want to give this to you, but because it's embarrassing, but read this. She read the entire thing. She goes, who are these people? And I said, they're our staff. And then I went, I got to either quit, fire everybody, or deal with this. So I gathered the 3 wisest people I know. A buddy of mine in Newport Beach named Morgan, a great consultant, 2 great consultants, one of them to Southwest Airlines. She's amazing. And we went to Newport Beach for 48 hours. And I didn't want to do this. I gave them the entire thing. And because my wife read it a second time and she said, I don't know, maybe you should pray about it. I'm like, shut up, honey. And so they read this thing. And at the end of reading it, I mean, I got hammered, but at the end of reading it, the fog lifted and I went, oh, it's all about 2 things, mission and morale. And I have been doing nothing but stepping on the mission accelerator, growth, all this kind of stuff. And I have ignored this morale accelerator. And our staff is now experiencing the destructive consequences of somebody that cares about the mission but doesn't care about them. And by the way, it's what the Apostle Paul said in Philippians. He goes, I'd rather be in heaven, but I'm sticking around for your progress, mission, and joy in the gospel, morale. And so we gathered our whole staff. We actually had to remove a couple leaders from what they were doing. But I started crying in front of our staff. I said, I'm really, really sorry. I said, we will get this right. We will create listening groups. We will figure out what will encourage, what will build a healthier culture here. And we went after that for probably 18 months. It changed our staff meeting. Our staff meeting is a blast. It changed our staff meeting. It changed our culture. By the way, for those of you that lead organizations, the other thing they said is, and this is a brilliant where they said, you have about 11 disgruntled's on your staff and they will not get better. They were disgruntled at home. They said, and your organization, so they said they need to be gone. So that happened. But it totally changed everything. But I have a whole bunch of things, but by far the shaping thing at Bayside was that whole disaster of a 360. Which turned out not to be a disaster. It turned out to be a pretty character leadership shape, I think, for me. And it's just, for those of you listening to this, it's a story I don't like to tell, but you should probably put it on the air.
What led to the morale dipping? You said focus on mission. Was there anything else?
It was more, for example, one of our guys, there's feelers and thinkers. Okay.
Yeah.
We had hired some thinkers with low feeling components. So like the staff values on the wall, staff values got put on the wall, like they just appeared. And this person wrote them And it was like, integrity. We expect you to da-da-da-da-da. I'm going, and this happened without me putting it on. So I wasn't paying enough attention, which is my fault. But there were good reasons for that. But I genuinely think all we talked about was this. We had not talked, like when I learned enough through that where I went, we want to actually come up with what our mission is going forward. But we spent 6 months on culture before we spent 6 months on mission. No, I would have never done that in my younger days. I would have flipped them.
Hey, I'm noticing we're at 4:00. We got off to a slow start. Do you have a hard stop, or you have a few more minutes?
I'm good. I like talking.
This is so good. This is so good, Ray. Wow. Okay, we'll keep going. So, a lot of leaders don't make it decades into leadership. They don't make it to your stage. Some of them, we've talked about this already, moral failure, collapse, scandal, gone, their character implodes. Some just get tired and cynical and they leave quietly. Some can't handle the pressure. When you look around at your colleagues, people you started with, people you knew, we were talking about John Maxwell, who seems to be finishing strong and not that he's finishing, but I mean, in his late 70s, you're saying he's a better leader than he was in his 60s or his 50s, like he's peaking. But you look at people who don't do that, who don't finish well. What are some of the mistakes, the repeated mistakes that when you survey the landscape as the people who didn't make it, you see them making? Because you've had to walk in with a mop and bucket a couple of times to clean up some messes from colleagues and peers.
Yeah, I would say every situation I've been in, something had happened to the leader or leaders that caused them to, it's funny, that caused them to morally fall off the edge of something, or elevate themselves. Like I know a pastor, the entire staff, when he walks into a room, the whole staff has to stand up out of respect.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going, Jesus walked in a room, got down on a knee and washed everybody's feet. I mean, how do we invent this stuff? Okay. And so
what's dangerous about that?
What's dangerous?
When that everybody has to stand up when I walk in the room. What's dangerous about that, Ray?
No, we're going to try that around here and see if it works.
Yeah. It's not my MO, but I'm just wondering because there must be like, what do you see as the trap?
I think what that does is it sets up I had a pastor tell me, he said, here's how I view it. I'm the race car driver. My staff is the pit crew. And I'm going, wait a second. What if they're all race car drivers? And our role is to help them be as great as they can be. Then we have a whole bunch of people out winning races instead of just spectating, watching us circle the track.
Wow.
And so I think it's dangerous on every level. I mean, leadership, when people use leadership for privileges instead of responsibility, it's a very damaging thing. Okay. When people expect people to lift them up instead of they're lifting other people up, I think it's the opposite of the incarnation. And I don't think it works well in business. Matter of fact, servant leadership has been, in my opinion, more popular in business than it is in ministry.
Yeah, it's not a foreign concept.
No. In other words, they're going, man, if these people do well, I do well. And so on that one, I just think that stuff is really destructive.
And so you said there were a couple of things that you've seen in colleagues or peers who didn't finish well or who phased out or fiddled out.
Yeah. The other one is, put it this way. I've had a lot of conversation. I get a lot of phone calls going, okay, I'm 60. Am I done? All this kind of stuff. And pretty much what I'm saying is you're done. I'm saying, first of all, you're done when there's four things. Number one, you're done if you've lost your fastball. And other people will tell you that, and you have to listen to them. Okay. Now it's got to be people without a motive, but other people will tell you that. So if you've done it for less fastball. Second is you're done if you've lost energy and you can't get it back. We all lose energy, but you can get it back. As a matter of fact, half of your listeners to this podcast hoping for a shot of energy. Good job. The third is you've lost vision and you can't get it back. You're done. Okay. Or the other one, and it's a little more rare, is there's something else you want to invest in. Grandkids, whatever it is. Yeah. So
leadership podcast.
Exactly. However, that's signs you're done. However, if you're 50 something, if you're 55 plus, okay, you probably are sharper than Edger. In fact, Carey, I told you about this earlier.
Yeah. Do read that. This is, we chatted way too long before we started recording.
I read this week. It's 2 studies. One of them from the New England Journal of Medicine said this. An extensive study in the USA found the most productive age in human life is between 60 and 70 years of age. Okay. The second most productive stage is 70 to 80. Some of you just getting rolling. The third most productive is 50 to 60. The average age of a Nobel Prize winner is 62. Average age of presidents of companies is 63. The average age of pastors of the 100 largest churches in the U.S. is 71. The average age of popes is 76. So if you're going to run for pope, you got time. In other words, that tells us the way it's been determined, the best years of your life are between 60 and 80. Okay. And in fact, we just had John Maxwell speak at our Thrive conference. Okay. And he's coming back this year. He killed it. And he's 78 years old. He absolutely killed it. Okay. I mean, he spoke in 4 different settings. And I've known John for a long time. I was at his 60th birthday party. We've golfed together. I've been listening to this guy for years. And I'm watching him. I was with him in all 4 settings. And I'm going, he's better at 78 than he was at 70. He's better at 78 than he was at 50 or 45 or 60. Who gets better at 78? We've been so conditioned to think that you turn 60 and you're done. Okay. I'm going, Maxwell is better at 78 than he's ever been. I was shocked. Okay. And so I like literally, we talked to our whole staff. Who do you want back? Maxwell. And you, if you stay healthy.
Yeah, I'm going to be healthy next year. That's my plan.
And then what happened?
Turn 60, end up in the hospital, but that's an aberration.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, a lot of you that are 55 plus, you haven't lost your fastball. You're as good as ever. You're smarter than ever. Okay. And however, that doesn't mean you're going to dominate for the next bunch of years, because every church in America needs 2 things. Okay. They need stability and they need a great next 30 years. Stability and they need a great next 30 years. You're the stability. Someone else has to be the next great 30 years. So the ultimate question is, even if somebody else is getting more press and more credit than I am I so excited about the next 30 years and the thing I started and built continuing to be better and better and better, then I've got to be humble enough to bring in world-class people. They've got to be my number one cheering fan and want me around, and I've got to be their number one support. And my ego needs have got to be met by other people doing really well instead of me getting the spotlight.
Okay. So on that note, how many locations does Bayside have right now?
We just adopted a church this weekend. Okay. I think it's 9 or 10.
9 or 10, roughly attendance on the weekend. You got?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. This
lots.
15, 16, 17, 18,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
Christmas.
One of the things
was 49,000. We had 1 million services. The next day we're waking up going, Christ is risen, we're all dead.
The thing that amazes me, because I've spent time at Bayside, I've hung out with some of your lead pastors. You said something earlier that most senior pastors, founding pastors would never say. I want them to preach. I don't need to preach.
Yep.
What is behind that? And I think that ties into your comment, I'm not the race car. What if they're all race cars, right? And I think that's what Brad Lomenick would agree. I would agree. Mark Clark would agree. All those people who knew Bayside inside out would agree. You've got a lot of leaders there, not doers. Preachers, they all preach, they all teach, they all lead. Why?
Why do they stay?
Why did you set it up that way? Because a lot of people would kind of, you're here to serve me.
Full disclosure, that's what I want to set up, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get it.
All right,
I get it. Let's be honest. So you want to set it, like that desire is in you.
You have to have enough self-awareness. Like I'm in a meeting a while back.
Yeah.
And we had this one guy on our staff that was talking way too much in meetings. Okay. And we had about 12 people, 15 people in my office. And so I went, I'm going to prove to this guy he's talking too much. So I wrote I didn't tell anybody. I had 8 F by 11 sheet of paper, notebooks. And so wherever the conversation went, I drew it. Okay. So somebody talks, line there, somebody talks, line there, somebody talks, line there. So I did this whole thing. And at the end of this whole thing, I went, I'm going to have a conversation with this guy because he talks too much. And sure enough, there was like a freeway going to his name. Okay. However, there was a wider freeway going to my name. And I literally went, I want to be the guy in the room that has all the wisdom and all the best ideas, and everybody listens to me and thinks I'm amazing. And maybe I should just shut up and let people talk more. Okay. Now, if you talk to my staff, they'd say, Ray probably hasn't mastered that yet, but at least I'm aware of it. I haven't preached on Christmas or Easter in a decade. Okay.
10 years.
Yeah. And the worst part is, Carey, nobody's complained. And when somebody asked me, they go, you rarely preach. Why? Here's my answer. Mark Clark, Kurt Harlow, Jason Kane, Michael Metcalf, Andrew McCourt, Kevin Thompson, Brandon Short, Dina Davidson, Morgan May Truell, Wesley Town, Cameron Wells, Scott Johnston, Colton Tucker. Every time I preach, they're incredible. One of them doesn't get to. Okay. And so I think, so number one is every time I preach, somebody does not get to preach that is gifted to preach and is rising and is going to be the next 30 years. Okay. And so for me, it's about, I want long-term sustainability and lower dependence on me, even though I don't want to be kicked out of this place.
What other conditions do you need to set up so leaders, true leaders, capital L leaders, people who want to communicate, people who want to contribute, people who could be leading very large mega churches themselves on their own, and who in some cases did, right, before they joined your team? I mean, Mark, who's been a buddy of mine for years, he was leading a church of 5,000 in Vancouver, one of the biggest churches in my country, Canada, comes down to work at Bayside. Really hard to attract and keep those leaders without saying, oh, and by the way, you're the new senior pastor. I'm stepping out, right? You've got a role on the team. That's really difficult to do. So for leaders who are looking to build that kind of stable of true leaders, what are the conditions that make people like that list of names stay and thrive?
First of all, you have to hire the right people in the first place.
Yeah.
Because
if they want your job, you have a mutiny.
Exactly. And yeah, so that's probably a future. We should do a thing on staffing sometime.
Yeah, we're not getting to any of my questions, so unfortunately, this is not your last appearance.
And talking to you, it's a blast. It's either my church or it's our church, and that doesn't just go for like. There's senior pastors, they're on our campus, okay? However, they're senior pastors, they're on their campus. However, they're all part of our campus, okay?
Yes.
And I control the preaching schedule, and everybody's willing to submit to that. They're all preaching at their campus twice a month, sometimes 3, but that's rare. Then they're preaching at one of our other campuses, which means everybody gets, it's kind of a cool thing. Everybody gets exposure. All the sermons are prepared together, okay? All of our staffs meet every Wednesday. It's a ball. It's an hour long. It is worship because it's really hard to worship in our own church. I'm trying to worship and I'm going, what's that usher doing? Staff meeting is when everybody gets to worship. There's usually a great 15-minute devotional. We throw it open. One guy came on our staff. We were recruiting this guy. He came to our staff meeting, and a guy named Colton Tucker got up, and great guy. Colton Tucker got up and said, "I'm so excited. My wife and I are expecting our first baby." The place went nuts, standing ovation. And he said, "I want to be part of this." Okay. And so some of it, you build this family. Okay. And so we have a thing called Thrive College, where it's the first couple of years of college, but we also train her to be leaders. And our last staff chapel this year, Thrive College, we had a couple kids share. It was so good. We just said, pass the mic. The entire staff meeting was Thrive College kids standing up, sharing, some of them in tears about how their life had changed. I mean, pretty incredible stuff. Instead of me getting up and making a bunch of announcements about whatever.
So to do that, you have to die to your ego. How are you dying to your ego?
I'll give you an example. All of our pastors are on a team. The highest thing in the organization is our senior pastors. Okay. For example, we don't hire a pastor without them coming in and being interviewed in that room. There's a famous story. I had this guy, good leader, great guy, good communicator. We were going to hire this guy. He's going to take the hill. And I was literally going, this guy's awesome. Okay. And so I had already met with the guy, and then I was out of town when our pastor meeting happened, and they met and they called me and went, nope.
Wow. So they told you no.
Oh, yeah, they told me, we don't think, they said, not our guy. It's happened more than once, happened recently. Not our guy. And I said, why? And they said, just culture doesn't feel like us. He's just not a fit for us. And I went, okay. So I have no ability to hire a pastor at our church without they hire whoever our future senior pastors are going to be.
Man.
Okay. Which means it's their church, not just my church. I'm part of that circle, and I might have some influence on it. But they know it's their campus. It is, however, what we say is we're looking for really strong leaders that are able to play in a sandbox with other leaders.
Sure.
So small leaders whose ego is in check. Okay. And
totally get that. And that's a great story, but there is something in you that a lot of leaders I know haven't done. And it is sort of that death to self, that death to ego, like to get to that place where you just allow a group of leaders that you hired to tell you, nah, you got the wrong guy, Ray. I'm not sure that would be easy for a lot of people. So I want to know, what were the moments, milestones, disciplines that have led you to a place where at this stage in your life, that is your approach? Because we can point to other people your age and stage who are doing the opposite, who is like, no, it is about me, and I'm milking this thing as long as I possibly can. I just want to know, like, how do you check your motivations?
At some point, that's a great question. At some point, it's got to be, well, another way to do this is everything in life is outcomes. Like I get calls from churches going, happened recently. What do we do? Senior pastor crisis with this, great church of a couple thousand people. And I literally said, okay, we're going to have an hour-long conversation. Let's get your outcomes clear. And when you get the outcomes clear, that then tells you what to do. And in their case, their first outcome was, let's not do this in a way that blows up the church. So they did what they needed to do over a year instead of reacting, okay? For me, the outcome is thriving churches and healthy campuses. We want every campus to be a thriving place and a healthy place, which means we need, to make that happen, we need great pastors who are team players. Okay. And they're not going to be team players if I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's so much, oh, Ray's so humble. I think it's more some outcomes are just more important than other outcomes. my ego needs being met is not a very high level outcome. An outcome where this whole thing does really well. Like Mark Clark coming in, okay? He's like a gift. He's like a responsibility. So's the rest of the folks I read. They're amazing gifts. My outcome with those guys is like Mark. I think God sent Mark to California because all of Canada is already listening to him. I think he and Christine Kane said the same thing about him. She said, I think he's the voice for apologetics for the next generation.
I agree. 100% agree.
I think he is going to be the least Strobel people listen to for the next 30 years.
Yeah. Mark's like early mid 40s. And the thing that amazes me, and it's really through Mark that I've gotten to know you very well over the last 3 or 4 years that we've spent a lot of time together because Mark's been a friend for a long time. When I hear you talk about him, and I remember when you were recruiting him, we had lunch at an airport. You remember that meal. It was, you were talking about him the way a father talks about a son. And, I've heard you, when he packs out Christmas in a way that honestly, just, you probably wouldn't pack out Christmas. I wouldn't pack out Christmas. When Mark does it, you are the most excited person in the room. There seems to be something that you have done, because we all have it in us that say, well, I wish I could pack it out like that. I wish I was that good. I wish I was. And I mean, I do my preaching course with Mark. And I think one of the joys of that course is we're great friends, but we're so different. Like my approach is so linear and didactic and and he's just like, I don't know what's going on, but it's amazing and it's brilliant. And, it's like Vince Vaughn, Tim Keller had a baby kind of thing. He's that kind of vibe. And so I really, yeah. I mean, he's entertaining, he's funny, he's street smart, and he's Keller sharp. And that's a really rare combination. But what I want to know is, like Andy Stanley told me years ago, and I know you know Andy, but he just said, if you want to get over envy and jealousy, celebrate what God has given. Celebrate what God has given other people. Leverage what God has given you. I'm going to celebrate your gift. I'm going to leverage what God has given me. And God gave me numbers and bullet points. God gave Mark the gift of humor. That's fine. You do that so well. Like you are like the dad going, look at my boy, look at my son, look at my team. What goes on inside you to make that happen? Because I don't see it enough in the church.
Number one is almost everybody these days is over-attacked and under-encouraged. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes.
I mean, especially these days, okay, in the last 4 years. Matter of fact, when the election rolled around down here, I said this 100 times. Stop letting politicians you don't know cause you to hate people you do know. And I mean, we're in a crazy season right now.
Yeah, we are.
And so I just think the question is this: would you rather build people up, lift people up, and have them do great, or tear people down? And so, for example, when Mark got here, you could leave this in, and I might check with Mark. When Mark got here, okay, there's a golf club he was going to belong to, which would be giving him access to all of our people. It was great. And so I got on a text string with a whole bunch of his friends, okay, guys that were here that loved him. And I said, let's buy him a golf cart. And so they're all, and I'm going, I'm in, y'all in, boom. We buy him a golf cart, and it's got to be a specific type for this place. But he's got his golf cart. He had like a 3-minute drive to this golf course. And
yeah, literally.
So I go, let's get him a golf cart, and everybody chips in. So we get it. We go to his house the day, and we're going to surprise his family and his daughters. And so we go over to the golf course, and we get the ugliest, beat up, dirty, ramshackle, destroyed golf cart we can, pull it in front of his house, put a blanket over it, and we bring the whole family out. Hey, we love you guys. We're so glad you moved here. We just thought you could really enjoy a golf cart, and we ripped the thing off. And it was so funny watching his daughters try to pretend they liked it.
They were trained well.
A real golf cart came driving up. They went nuts. Okay.
It's a gorgeous golf cart. He sent me the video of that. That is hilarious. Such a great moment.
That's a whole lot more fun to do for people than trying to figure out ways to keep them from getting too much applause, which just sounds so petty. Okay.
Yeah.
But all of these folks, Kurt Harlow, Jason Kane, Michael Metcalf, all of these folks, like we introduced, a church is becoming a Bayside, and we introduced that Michael Metcalf was going to be their pastor. We introduced that yesterday. Okay. And the place, whammo, standing ovation. I'm on stage. First thing I do is I get up and I take a video of the whole standing ovation because Michael's not there. Okay. And the first thing I do is send him that. Okay. I just wanted him to see it. Why would you not spend a life lifting people up?
It's such a gift, right? I knew we needed to have this conversation. I didn't know how badly we needed to have this conversation. This has been incredible. I'll put us down for a round 2 if you're open, because there's so much we didn't touch on. But is there anything you think leaders need to hear right now that we didn't touch on in these 90 minutes? Because I think this has been a massive dose of wisdom, encouragement, vulnerability, unlikely surprises along the way that actually move in a positive direction, and a good series of clues as to how to trend toward finishing well in ministry.
Yeah. You got time for a quick story?
I got lots of time.
Yeah. So if I could pastor you all, business or whatever you're doing, my life, I learned something that I've been saying all over the country. And what happened is, do you all remember the day, Carey, remember the day where COVID shut the world down? It was a Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
It was Sunday afternoon. We have a conference called Thrive, and we cut it off at about 4,000 people up north. We'd started one in Southern California, and we limited that to 2,000 people. It was in Palm Springs, and that had just filled that morning. Okay, go to a place in the desert, and I'm in the backyard. And the news flash comes and the world shuts down. And I mean, professional sports pulls the plug, Kachuk pulled the plug, the whole thing crashes. And I have to pull the plug on our conference, both of them. And I call our pastors. We get on a Zoom call. Actually, pre-Zoom, get on a call. And I tell them, we all decide we got to pull the plug on it. And the guy that wrote the book on hope, I'm bummed out for days.
Sure. Who wouldn't be?
And because I'm going, I know what happens to people at this. And it's just, you know what it's like when, and.
Yeah, I lost South by Southwest, a big trip to Australia, all that stuff. It was tough.
Geez. And so I'm just bummed out. And finally, I think about a week later, we're still in Palm Springs, and my wife was going, well, I'm starting to think Carol's probably thinking she's married to some depressed jerk, which is. So I finally go, okay, I got to deal with this. So I take my Bible and I take a notebook and a piece of paper and I go sit in the backyard and I go, God, I'm going to read this thing until something happens. And I just start reading all these different promises and these different things. And then, because I'm pretty sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then it was like, it wasn't an audible voice from God, but crystal clear. God said to me, if you will let go of discouragement and replace it with dreaming, the world just might be a better place. So I write it. I take this. If you will, it was like taking dictation. It was like, if you will let go of discouragement and replace it with dreaming, the world just might be a better place. And so I go, all right, well, what am I discouraged about? And I wrote down canceling the Thrive conference. And then I felt like God said, well, dream. And so I literally wrote down, what if we launched, like, God's a big God, go for it. What if we launched the largest ever completely online, totally free leadership conference in history? What if we asked every major great communicator, Maxwell, Carey Nieuwhof, to speak for free? What if we raised $1 million at that to help kids that are going to be negatively affected by COVID? And what if we did it all 6 weeks from now on the day of our original conference? Well, one step ahead, you're the leader, 10 steps ahead, you're the target. So I call our team and I tell, by the way, that all took like, by the time I pulled that paper out, after I read a bunch of stuff, that took like 3 minutes. It was like taking, God, it was like, if you will let go of discouragement and replace it with dreaming. So I call our team together. I tell them this whole thing. I said, I know this is insane. I know it's 6 weeks, but look, we're not doing anything else anyway. So what do you think? They greenlit it. Okay. I mean, it was like, and when it took off, build a whole studio up here and all this stuff. Every single person we asked to speak for free said yes. Every single one. Okay. And we added a day. We actually 2 weeks before added a full day before on race and justice in America. Okay. And I mean, we asked all these great communicators to speak. It was pretty incredible. And so the first day, I'm at this main desk. It was like ESPN sets all over the room. I'm at this main desk and we start this thing. It's about a 15-minute intro and we cut, I think, to John Maxwell for the first session. So I say in the headset to the producer, is anybody watching this? I mean, they're like, our conferences combined had 6,000 people. I was hoping there were at least, my mom's watching maybe. It was to that point. I'm convinced, I don't know if anybody's watching this. Was this a gigantic waste of effort? And she says, I'll slide a paper down the desk. So this paper slides down and I look at it and it says there are currently 242,000 individual distinct devices tuned in right now. Most of these are in settings where more than one person is watching. So our lowest estimate, and this is accurate stuff, our lowest estimate is there are at least 500,000 people tuned in right now. This should go up next week or next tomorrow. And then it said, and here's a list of countries. There were 42 countries. Okay. It was in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, places that we can't get into. And tears start streaming down my face at this desk. And what I want to say to those of you that are listening, no matter what you do, business, ministry, raising a family, whatever it is, something very powerful happens when you let go of discouragement and replace it with dreaming. You and your world become a much better place. I had to learn it the hard way, but discouragement will take you down every time. You replace it with dreaming, all of a sudden you just might have a future.
Ray, wow. Thank you. The book we were referencing, what's it called?
It's called Hope Quotient. Matter of fact, I just did
HQ.
It was HQ. It's called Hope Quotient. We actually think your HQ is more important than your IQ, which is good news for me.
So let's put it back on the Wall Street Journal and New York Times bestseller list, audience. Go out and get yourself a copy. I will give 5 copies away to people watching on YouTube. So just type, I want to stay encouraged in the comments and we'll give away 5 copies, but go buy some for your team. This is worth the price of admission. I have never thought about encouragement that way. And that's a really important value for me. And you just shared so much, but go buy a copy. It's called Hope Quotient. Maybe we'll give you one too over on YouTube.
Carey, right. If you, I don't know what it is in Canada. If you text the word hope to 56316.
Okay, so hope to 56316.
I've taken the book. I've shot it in an 8-part course.
Oh, cool.
And you can get that for free. And then years ago, we did this book. We all wrote the country's first ever online hope test. Okay. So if you text that, we will send you a code and you can you can actually take an online test put together by the 3 of us that will test you in every one of these 7 areas. Okay.
So it's hope to
56316.
56316. You can do that too. All right. We'll get a lot of call to actions. Ray, you're a great follow on Instagram. We'll link to everything in the show notes. I'm excited about being at Thrive 2026, God willing. It's going to be great. And I want to thank you so much. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for encouraging just so many leaders today. I think, sometimes we ask, what's your all-time favorite episode? I think this as a candidate, 750 episodes in, to become some leaders' all-time favorite episode. And
by the way, here's what I'll say to you. You are the best friends leaders currently have. You're the best friend they have. And I don't know anybody that doesn't listen to you, and I know a lot of people. So I know it's a lot of work behind the scenes. And so Thanks for giving up what you were doing, but you are the person we listen to, but everybody else I know listens to. So,
well, it is one of the great joys and strange mysteries of my life that you end up in the places that you do. But it was funny. I was thinking about it on the weekend, lots of time to reflect and, recovering from this anemia thing I got. And I'm like, I don't know what the shelf life on the podcast is, but as long as we continue to have very fascinating human beings and really interesting topics to talk about, I think it's indefinite. And today's case in point, like what a great conversation, Ray. And just thanks for showing up. Thanks for going beyond scripted questions, which I didn't even touch today, and honest answers and being vulnerable, because I think that particularly in an age of AI and fake news and everything, it's the heart to heart. It's that's what it's really like being Ray Johnston. That's what it's really like leading a church for decades and trying to forge that long obedience in the same direction. That's the stuff that we need, and it's too rare. And for you to bring that today has been a huge gift to me and to the audience. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I have one request.
Yeah, what?
Said about you being the best friend leaders have, leave it in. Don't cut that part out.
Okay. I will leave it in.